When it comes to everything fantasy football, you have to ask one question. Don't you deserve a fighting chance? And now, welcome to Fighting Chance Live with your hosts, Kevin Tompkins and Scott Fishbowl 9 winner, Gary Haddow.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back after a little hiatus here. We're back with Fighting Chance Live. I'm Kevin Tompkins, and Gary, how you doing, my man?
Doing fantastic. Just getting closer and closer to Scott Fishbowl, getting closer and closer to the season. We're getting positive news. Everything's just chugging along, and it's just nice to be back here in front of the mic, in front of the camera, and have an awesome guest with us.
That's right. We've got from the Fantasy Football Faceoff, we have Anthony Cervino joining us. Anthony, how are you, my man?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Can't complain. 'Tis the season, the Scott Fishbowl season.
Yes.
Gary, how was it to win that?
Honestly, I've been playing fantasy for 10 years. Nothing even comes close. It's like the only even thing that even competes is like getting the championship in like your home league with your buddies and all that stuff. But Those are smaller leagues, so it doesn't have the same weight. And just it was just the craziest thing. And then, it's allowed us to have a little bit more of an audience, and Twitter's kind of blown up. I'm almost at 2,000 followers, which is nuts. And dude, it's just awesome. I'm looking forward to SFBX, but honestly, I will say this every time I talk about it. I could play 1,200 more times in Scott Fish. I don't even know if I'll ever make the finals again, let alone win. It's just so difficult. I mean,
nothing's guaranteed. And was this your first year?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was my first year, like really even being involved in Twitter. I just gotten involved with Fighting Chance via Ryan Hallam, and Scott asked Ryan and said, "Hey, I want to get everybody in Fighting Chance in," and then all of a sudden here we are, and it's been a roller coaster. It's been awesome though.
My first year, and you don't forget it, I went 11 straight wins. And then lost in week 12, which is the final week of the SFB regular season. Mm-hmm. That was the year Gronk had that late one-game suspension, so that was kind of the factor. And ever since then, I can't get back.
Yeah, that dirty hit on the Bills, man. I can't. Yeah, everybody remembers that.
So I hang my hat on that and need to get back into the postseason.
Yeah, I want to pretend and just tell everybody, no, like you got this, like you're good. But it's like, even to get into the playoffs, at least last year it was 240 teams. And then the finals, anybody that doesn't know what it's like at the end, you're really playing best of 20, like 2 weeks in a row. And the odds of being the best team out of 20 is absolutely insane. So
yeah, just watching you on the sidelines going 4-8 with my blown fab budget on Gardner Minshew after Roethlisberger went down. But you know what? It's someone from Fighting Chance is going to win it this year, and it might be me. We'll see. But we're going to have to change the name of the podcast if I win.
I love the new name. What did you say? 2 Champs, 1 Pod.
2 Champs, 1 Pod.
That'd be fantastic.
I like it.
We're going to have to do that. But, baby steps. I went 4-8. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll go 5-7. Maybe Scott Fishbowl 17 will be my year. We'll see.
Well, moving on to things. Anthony, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us, where we can find you, and also, about your podathon coming up, because that's a huge deal.
Yeah, well, you can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru, and you can follow my show at the FFFaceoff on all of the top social media and podcast platforms and live streaming. We're pretty much everywhere where we can be. And we are running a podathon, a mental health podathon on Saturday, July 11th. We have really a packed, star-studded guest list. It's on both myself and my co-host, Mike Hoff at the FF Realist. We're always putting out tweets about it, so you really have to check it out. It's for a great cause. And, we have guys, fantasy footballers, Matthew Berry, Michael Fabiano. We are partnered with Hayden Hurst and his foundation against mental health. So this is going to be an awesome event, 16 hours.
Wow.
That's awesome. And we'll be there too. Me and Gary will be filling one of those time slots. So definitely can't wait for that.
And how do people donate? Anybody that's listening, if they do want to donate, how do they get involved
It's
there?
most likely going to be through GoFundMe.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
That's fantastic. I'm excited to be a part of it. Excited to hear, everybody else doing their pod thing. And then I've heard that you have some special guests that are going to be coming on, actually football players.
Yes, we do. One of which, Hayden himself, and also Darius Geis. And we're trying to get a few more.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Getting the buy-in from the players too, especially when it's fantasy. And I know it's kind of a bane of their existence at times. So that's fantastic. Can't wait to be part of it.
Yep, absolutely same. And then one more piece of news here. We had Stocks and Murph from the 5 Yard Rush podcast, and if you watch that episode, if you haven't, go back on YouTube, find it, subscribe to us too. And for their fantasy football playbook, we actually have a promo code for our listeners. If you're listening to this, if you go on 5 Yard Rush, is it 5yardrush.uk, correct?
.co.uk.
If you go to purchase that playbook, use the code FIGHTING and you'll receive 25% off for that, which is a gracious gift from those guys, and we appreciate them giving that to us to give to all of you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. Kevin and I both have copies of it. It's awesome. I just have a digital copy rather than just a paperback one, but I know it's the top-selling American football fantasy football magazine for the Amazon UK. So
easy for you to say.
It's something there, right? So it is awesome. I highly recommend checking it out. So, but moving on into today, we wanted to bring Anthony on here so that we could talk a little bit of running backs. We're just going to kind of go through our top 12 running backs, have some conversations there, see where we differ, agree. I got various questions on some players, and so we'll just kind of jump into it. I think the easiest way, if you're okay with it, Anthony, we'll just kind of go through the rankings and kind of just go 1 through 12, and here we are. So no surprise, we're starting out with Christian McCaffrey. He's going to be the first overall pick, I think, or first running back. I think in most leagues, he's probably the first overall pick, unless you're talking about Superflex. With CMC, Anthony, is there a downside here? Do you think he should be the 101? Is there anywhere else you might be going?
Christian McCaffrey, he's really the de facto 101, and you can make a case for Saquon Barkley. But I feel like 9 times out of 10, I'm going to go Christian McCaffrey out of that spot. And I do have some trepidations because they did move on from Trey Turner, who's now with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah.
He's a Pro Bowl interior offensive lineman. There's some other changes along that line. You have Teddy Bridgewater. This defense is going to be terrible. But even with all that considered, it's almost like I'm regurgitating what happened to them last year, and Christian McCaffrey still had a monster year.
Yeah. Yeah.
If anything, with Teddy Bridgewater, he can even see more targets, which is mind-blowing to even think.
Yeah, it'll be amazing, especially if he does top the target mark. I can see his yardage on the ground is going to be a little bit less, but you just have such a floor in any form of PPR league, just knowing that you have those additional yards through the air and additional catches. And I'm pretty sure last year he played like 98% of snaps or something. It's some ungodly number I don't know if I've ever seen before.
Yeah, something like that. He was over 95%.
98.4%.
That's absolutely crazy for a running back to be doing that. But I mean, you have to be an all-star that can block, that can pass, that can catch, that can do everything. And when you have that, I mean, how do you take him off the field? Even if you say you want to lighten his workload, I don't really know how you do that.
And give it to who?
Good. Yeah. I don't even know who their backup is right now. It's not Scarlett. It's
still
Bonifon.
Yeah. I mean, that's job security right there. So,
yep.
Well, then moving on to 2, Saquon Barkley, I think that he actually does have a tiny bit of question mark, but I feel like the question mark is just the recency bias, right? Last year he had a down year, but that was because of his tweaked ankle. And by the time he finally got over it, he really came back. Do you think that if you had to put the odds at Barkley being able to surpass CMC, What do you think that would be? What's the likelihood there? Kevin.
The likelihood that
No, you're good. You're good.
Go ahead.
the likelihood that he outproduces, say, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, just in fantasy points.
I mean, I would almost go 50-50, depending on how you foresee this Giants offense, because I'm a Cowboys fan. As bad as Jason Garrett was as a head coach, you have to factor in the Jerry Jones factor with how much control he has or doesn't have. Jason Garrett, before guys like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, they were these young offensive coordinator hires. Jason Garrett was that back in the Wade Phillips era Cowboys. I think Jason Garrett's really going to help this offense. They fed it to Zeke. He knows what he has in Saquon Barkley, and they're going to be off to a rough start. The first 3 games are against top 10 defenses, but after that, I can see this offense and Saquon and even Daniel Jones really breaking out.
Yeah, they're going to have room he's going to have a lot more room to maneuver. He'll see
that offensive line's going to be better.
Yeah, he'll see less stacked boxes too. So, with it's a burgeoning offense. I mean, Daniel Jones, for all you want to say about him, looked pretty good. He's got weapons now. He's got Golden Tate. He's got Shepard. Those guys have to stay healthy. They got Darius Slayton. Can Ingram stay healthy? It's a burgeoning offense and certainly an underrated one. It's only going to help Barkley, have more lanes to run in, catch passes. They're going to be in more negative game scripts based on their team. So, you could see Barkley keep that safe floor, in the receiving game.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt having a quarterback who is happy to sling it around, is going to take some chances. And it's not as if Barkley just lives off of dump offs. No. He can go anywhere on the field and still be a viable weapon no matter what. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. It's so weird that do you put him in McCaffrey's tier? Are the 2 of them in a tier alone, or how does that break down?
I'd put those 2. I'd put Zeke in there too, just because those 3 are as safe as it gets, especially at the running back position. The depth pretty much sliding off a cliff after, 11 or 12. But those 3, you could pretty much take those 3 to the bank.
So with Zeke, I mean, he's our consensus number 3 also. Again, I don't really see the downside to him. I think he just maybe doesn't have the ceiling that we think of with McCaffrey and Barkley. He doesn't have as many receptions as we would associate with them. But yeah, I mean, I feel like you're just kind of have Zeke fall into your lap at like the 3, 4, 5 spot, depending on, what type of league it is. But you're never unhappy that you got him, right?
No. You're
Sorry, guys.
You're never unhappy with Zeke. I mean, if you're getting him at 3, it's a bargain. Keep in mind, over the last 5 years, he's finished in the top 6 3 times. He's the only running back who can say that. So what you're getting with him, and maybe you don't get his 2018 receiving numbers, and they did come down a little bit, but I think you can start to see, the numbers that he put up last year in the receiving game, 54 receptions. That's a good number for him. You're always going to get 1,300 plus yards. You want to see more goal line carries out of Zeke Elliott too, because I feel like the Cowboys really didn't use him as much as they probably should have in that department, and that's only going to help Zeke Elliott owners there to get him up in that maybe RB1, RB2. But as an RB3, he's just lock it in. He's a rock star.
Yeah. Anthony, do you see if Mike McCarthy's going to have any big impact, coming in as a new head coach?
I like the McCarthy hire, but the fact that they retain Kellen Moore, I think we're going to see more of the Kellen Moore style offense with Mike McCarthy wrinkles in Dallas. So I'm not expecting any type of regression from Ezekiel Elliott, because you could say that McCarthy never used a running back or rarely used a running back in Green Bay, but did they have an Ezekiel Elliott?
They sure
The
did
answer
not.
is no. And, even let's go to the tight end position. People worry about Blake Jarwin. So if you go back to Jermichael Finley, when he was healthy and playing double-digit games in a Mike McCarthy offense, he was extremely productive. Yeah. So I'm not really worried about McCarthy taking anything away from Ezekiel Elliott. And my co-host, Mike Hoff, pulled up this stat anytime we talk about these top-end running backs, that Ezekiel Elliott and Christian McCaffrey are the only two backs to finish as an RB2 or better in all but 1 or 2 games last year.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a safe floor. In terms of, we talked about the backups for CMC and with Barkley. Like, they don't really have, the backup for Barkley is what? Deion Lewis and Elijah Penny, I think. Whereas Elliott, you do have Tony Pollard. So the one positive, a positive to that is you can have Elliott early in your drafts, get him in your first round. And if you can try and get Pollard later, he is one of the best handcuffs you can have, because we've seen what he can do. He might take some carries away, but all in all, like, that backfield, no matter what, should be pretty damn productive with that offensive line, even if it's gotten a little bit worse. But they're still going to be an elite, if not very, very good offensive line. So I'm looking forward to what the Cowboys do this year. I think everybody is.
Yeah, they may have lost Frederick, but I don't even know how you say his last name. Is it Biades?
I always butcher it, but Tyler Biasek, the 4th round rookie.
Yeah, from Wisconsin, I believe. Yeah,
I think if we see a training camp and a preseason, and it looks like we might be going in that direction, that he can ultimately win the starting job. But the guy that they currently have penciled in, Joe Looney, 2 years ago when Frederick missed the entire year with his with the bars, I believe it was the bars syndrome. Joe Looney played the entire year, and he wasn't very good. Per Pro Football Focus, very poorly graded, but this is now his second time, and he now has that experience from 2 years ago, so I don't think he's going to be as bad as he was, 2017 or 2018?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would expect that they're still just going to hit the ground running. Adding CeeDee Lamb to that offense, again, just gives a whole another weapon that already they're loaded with weapons with Gallup and with
and it's Biadish.
Biadish. Okay. There we are.
File that one away.
So continuing with the chalk, we all have Kamara at 4. I think we all agree that that's definitely a tier break there down to Kamara. Nothing against Kamara, because he's amazing. And last year we just started to see. He's a little bit of a smaller guy. He's not a small guy, but he's smaller. And can he withstand being the guy? We saw when Latavius came in, he also did really well. But with Kamara, what's the downside to putting him in front of an Elliott or putting him in front of a Barkley and putting him in that top 4 even? Last year this time we were talking about the top 4, and that was a tier break. Anthony.
I can't put Alvin Kamara into that top 3 tier. I believe he starts the following one. And a lot of it is because I have question marks about usage. If you go back to 2018, he had that monster year. He was the number 2 back in red zone touches with 72. And consequently, he was a number 2 back in total touchdowns with 18. Yeah. Last year, he was 17th in red zone touches with 36. So that's basically half, playing in 1 less game, and his touchdowns plummeted to 6. Mm-hmm. So where is this usage going? Because it's not like Latavius Murray comes, he replaced Mark Ingram.
Yeah.
Is it the fact that the Saints maybe didn't trust Ingram coming off of what was it, a 6-game suspension a couple of years ago, and they like Murray more? I don't know what it is, but is this the type of usage we're going to get? Because if Alvin Kamara isn't getting those red zone touches, then the touchdowns are probably not going to come. Or is it because of Jared Cook?
I think it's a lot of, Drew Brees will, they'll put anybody in those sub packages, and they're, the vultures pretty much. You got your Taysom Hills, and they're not going to go with, your Camaras. I'd say he's probably got some touchdown regression, back to the mean, certainly from 18 to 6, and the red zone usage certainly a factor. But of a talent like that, you got to figure he's definitely due for that regression.
Yeah, I'm curious what Emmanuel Sanders in combination with Cook is now how that's going to impact Kamara's even target share. Finally they have a viable number 2, and Cook came on towards the second half of the season. He started taking away not only viable targets, but damn, he was taking touchdowns to the house. Maybe I'm just biased because he did it against the Niners a few times, but I could see that Kamara, he's going to be a high floor and a high ceiling guy, but he just might not be what we saw in 2018. Don't think he's going to repeat just because of the injuries. So I definitely agree with all that. Then we come to number 5, Dalvin Cook, man of the hour, biggest question marks there. I'm just going to start the question off with, for both of you, do you think he's going to hold out into the regular season? And if your answer is no, do you think this will impact his regular season? So we'll start with Kevin, then we'll go to Anthony.
Cook, yeah, I think it will go into the regular season. With the new CBA, it's pretty much made guys in their rookie contract. It's very difficult to hold out. Right now he has virtually no leverage with them bringing Madison in last year as a 3rd round pick, seeing what he did, albeit a bit inefficient, but he looked really good from the eye test. I think him and Boone in combination can certainly do not as good of a job as Cook, but a serviceable enough job to not miss Dalvin Cook. Just with the state of the league right now and how running backs really aren't paid as, that much, I just don't see the leverage that Dalvin Cook has into strong arming the Vikings and giving him a contract. I think he said he wanted, quote, a reasonable contract. That's, his version of reasonable, certainly different from other people's definition of reasonable. So we'll see how this plays, but I think he comes back middle of the season to accrue his league year. Because if he doesn't, I believe with the new CBA, he turns into a restricted free agent. Vikings can put, a tender on him and then go from there. I think he collects his accrued year, becomes a free agent. I don't think the Vikings are going to pay him what he wants. With his injury history, I certainly wouldn't put top dollar on him either. So yeah, I think it's about week 8, week 7, so we can get that accrued year.
It's quite pessimistic, Kevin. Anthony, where are you at on this?
The thing that sticks out with Dalvin Cook with this report was Adam Schefter's tweet. It was so adamant where, when you saw these other holdouts, they were kind of, well, maybe I'll play, maybe I'll not. I want a new deal. This one is like, in quote, he's out without a reasonable extension. He will not be showing up. They're very adamant, and that kind of resonates with me. That sticks with me.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at Melvin Gordon all over again.
Mm-hmm. Because
Dalvin Cook, you have one side of the argument, and he sees Le'Veon Bell, well, it's not really working with the Jets. He didn't really get the money he wanted. Melvin Gordon obviously didn't get what he wanted. But on the other side, Dalvin Cook sees Zeke and Christian McCaffrey get paid. So Dalvin is sitting here saying, well, I'm just as good as those guys who did get paid.
Yeah.
So I can see a situation where he does hold out. And one of you brought up Alexander Madison, and albeit only on 100 carries, he actually had 4.6 yards per carry versus Dalvin Cook's 4.5 for what it's worth. But what Dalvin Cook's absence could and most likely will affect is if you go back to last year, the Vikings were 31st in team pass plays per game, right around 30.9. In 2018, that's when Dalvin wasn't quite himself. I know he missed a bunch of time. They threw the ball roughly 10 more times per game. They were 6th in team pass plays per game. So that's how much that offense changes with and without Dalvin Cook. So if anything, if Cook holds out, you got to buy Kirk Cousins at his current ADP.
By Adam Thielen too.
Fantastic. Like they had to have known this before they traded Diggs. They had to know this was a possibility. I mean, these teams are talking to agents, so they have some idea of what could be coming. And to get, they trade Diggs, it makes me even like Justin Jefferson a little bit more here in that if he is going to hold out. Realistically, where right now are you putting Cook? Like where ballpark, where are you drafting him? Or if you have him in a rank right now, we all have him at 5 in this rank, but pretty sure everyone's probably going to move him back within the next month or the next week even.
I had him at 4 before that announcement.
Me too.
And I dropped him one spot. And the closer we get to the season, I'm just going to keep devaluing him.
Yeah. If the season started and he is not reporting, where are you putting him at that point? Because you're probably assuming he's going to go to this week 7, week 8 mark. Do the same thing as Melvin.
I might value him just like Melvin Gordon, maybe 3rd round.
Yeah.
Low end RB2 for me, probably in the 20s, I'd say. That's about where Gordon's going.
Where did Gordon finish last year? He didn't have RB23. If you go back to the year that Zeke had the 6 games missed with the suspension, he finished as the RB13.
Which is such an amazing stat. Oh my God, he was so good. Damn.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean that makes sense. Somewhere between 13 and 23. I mean, I would prefer Cook over Melvin on any day. So if he got the same amount of time, that would make sense to me. Well, man, I mean, I just hope that he shows up, and anybody that already done their draft that has Dalvin. I mean,
no, actually, he still finished as an RB1. My bad.
Wow.
In 10 games.
It's crazy. So
I don't believe we're going to see that from Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Different offenses, different offensive lines, different players even. So we finally get to a fork in the road here where we have a little bit of difference. So Anthony and I have Derrick Henry at 6, and Kevin just recently put Drake up to 6. So Kevin, why don't you tell us about Drake, and then Anthony and I will talk about Henry.
I moved Kenyon Drake up pretty aggressively. I've been going through this the last couple days. Actually when I moved Dalvin Cook down, I wanted to at least take a look at the top 12 and just kind of cement things a little bit for right now. Kenyon Drake's his receiving floor is really what sold me on a lot of his value. The Cardinals threw to the running back position 104 times last year. So if you're talking maybe Chase Edmonds gets 25 to 30 of those, that's a pretty healthy target share, at least for Kenyon Drake, to go along with the fact that when he was traded to Arizona, from then on, he was RB4. In that offense with the weapons they have now, they have DeAndre Hopkins, year 2 of Kyler Murray. It's hard for me. He has the least questions out of the guys ranked around him. So that's what led me to put him at RB 6 for me.
And it's so interesting, if we're comparing Drake and Henry, like they seem like almost polar opposite players. Drake is a little bit smaller. Henry's obviously this giant, but he doesn't catch, whereas Drake kind of does everything. But they both have such high touchdown upsides. Drake because of the offense he's in and just kind of the skill set he has, whereas Henry, I mean, I don't know how you stop Henry. Like he's just one of the most dominating on the ground pure runners that I've seen in a long time. It just runs you over. Mm-hmm. His touchdown upside for me is the sole reason that I have him at 6. What's funny is I have Drake at 7, and I have set Drake there because of his touchdown upside. But Henry is like the first running back I can think of in a very long time where if he got to 20 touchdowns on the ground, even over that, I wouldn't actually be surprised because he's just that much of a badass, and he's just is a Mack truck when he's running. Anthony, where are you at with Henry?
I have Henry right in the same spot that you do, and he's a player that I could potentially flip-flop, move him back a spot because he doesn't have that PPR floor. And we'll get into Leonard Fournette and some other players with that floor that I like. Derrick Henry just doesn't have it. I believe I saw a stat where in his past 30 games, he's caught like 28 passes, right around there, like fewer than a catch a game.
What's so weird is when he
this
catches
is a player
the ball, he
you're
looks
solely relying on these carries. And sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to get this out before I forget it. The most recent report is that Derrick Henry's workload is going to be game flow dependent. Does that mean if they get into a hole, they're just going to drop back with Ryan Tannehill? Because in the past, in Derrick Henry's career, he wasn't always getting fed 20, 25, 30 carries a game. And if he is going to get 30 carries a game like they finished last season going into the playoffs, how is his body going to hold up? We could be looking at another Earl Campbell.
Yeah. I just don't know how you make that deep of a playoff run that you did on the back of Henry and say, let's change it up. My biggest concern for Henry is actually the loss of Jack Conklin and losing their right tackle. When he ran behind Conklin, I mean, he just had yards and yards. That's, to me, like losing a key piece of your offensive line. That's a huge deal. But with Ryan Tannehill getting better, more comfortable in the offense, having A.J. Brown have another year, and Johnny Smith having another year to get a little bit better, I don't know. I think that Henry's going to have some room. I think that they're not going to be running against stacked boxes all the time, or at least if they do, that'll even out over the course of the game. Their defense is also so good. Like they're a good team. As much as I don't really care about the Titans in general, they are just a legitimately good team. So I'm not sure how many games they're just going to get blown out and there's not going to be a chance for Henry to be on the field.
And that's where I'm at with that as far as the efficiency of that offense last year. Certainly with Tannehill and A.J. Brown and, the guys you mentioned. So if Tannehill takes that step back from last season in those 10 games he played, that's certainly going to affect Henry too. You're going to have some negative game scripts. I believe in the Titans. I think they're a good team. Do I think they're a deep playoff team? I'm not so sure of that. Even they made that run last year. I'm just not sure of that. And that's kind of that gives me some trepidation as far as Henry goes, because once they do get into a negative game script, he's not going to be on the field as much. And maybe Darrington Evans gets a little bit of run too. And, I'm picking him up in the back end of a lot of drafts. Yeah. I do love Derrick Henry. When they're on, he's great. And that's a lot for me to say because I was not a Derrick Henry guy. I thought, after the 4 games that he had where he had about, I believe, 35% or so of his yards in those 4 games at the end of 2018, they actually used him, to his strengths and just let him run over people. And that was shocking. And it was good to see Arthur Smith really give him that run. So that's kind of where that lies for me as far as Derrick Henry. I want to really buy into him, but I'm just not sure the efficiency of that offense and if that's going to, affect him going forward.
He's just so damn fun to watch run the ball, though. Just watch people try to tackle him. It's so awesome. All right, so moving on to 7. So I'm actually going to throw out a question here because you guys both have Mixon at 7. I have him at 9, and it was a struggle to put him up there. Sell me on Mixon. Like, what am I missing about Joe Mixon? Because some people are like, he could be the RB1, and he quite could be, but I don't know. There just are enough red flags with the offense and whatnot and possible holdout talks that I'm just so hesitant. Mixon feels like somebody that at the back of the first round, I'm like, all right, I'll take Mixon. I guess I'll take Mixon, not someone that I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I go get him. So you guys sell me on him.
I'll cede that to Anthony.
I'm a big Joe Mixon guy. And one of the biggest reasons, if you look at Joe Mixon's production in the past 2 seasons, he's 2 years removed from leading the AFC in rushing in 14 games behind a bad offensive line. Last year, he had a little bit of a slow start, but was super productive in the second half of the year, really having one of his best games against New England and Cleveland, some of the better run defenses in the league.
Yeah.
Again, behind a bad offensive line, a couple of games with Ryan Finley. I think Joe Mixon in this offense with Joe Burrow, the receivers are going to be healthy. I think this could be the year that we finally see Joe Mixon break out. What's a little bit surprising is that I always thought he was a little bit busier as a pass catcher, and we haven't even seen that ceiling yet. He's the closest thing. Like, I know that term 3 down backs obsolete, but it never seems like he leaves the field.
I agree. His target numbers were lower than I thought they were. His reception total in particular, when I was going in to be like, why can't I move him up? He catches so many passes, and I looked at it, and I was very surprised. Was it 30, 40 balls that he caught last year? I don't think it was much more than
35.
35 of 45 targets.
But when you think of him, he almost feels like a 50, 60 catch guy with how we think of his receiving prowess. And maybe that was the new coach coming in, and that slow start was attributed to that chaos when they lost Jonah Williams, their rookie tackle that ended up tearing his ACL. I agree that the offense is ready and poised to just have this explosion. I'm really excited about the Bengals offense, but I'm a little bit hesitant. But that being said, what you're saying right now is making me think I for sure need to move him up.
And really, with Joe Mixon, this offensive line is going to be better. They're going to get Jonah Williams back. And his yards per carry and yards per touch numbers, they were down. But where I think Joe Mixon is very underrated is how efficient he is with the football in his hand. 14th in breakaway runs, number 1 in evaded tackles, number 4 in juke rate. He's a real slippery running back. I don't think he gets the credit for that. 2nd in yards created, which means if he can get an improvement from this offensive line and he can get a little bit of help getting to that second level and then put some moves on, I think we're going to see a really different version of Joe Mixon if this offense can stay healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got anything to add, Kevin?
It's just, I think the offensive environment, with a new signal caller and Joe Burrow, it's only going to help things. You've still got those receivers there. Jonah Williams is just going to be like another draft pick. You're pretty much just getting him to cement at left tackle there. So there's still some growing to do in Cincinnati, but what a situation for Joe Burrow to come into, because you see number 1 overall picks and they're not going into great situations. Joe Burrow pretty much has a ready-made offense aside from a good portion of the offensive line, ready to rock. I think they're going to be a vastly underrated offense, and that could certainly help Mixon. Maybe he gets up to the 45, 50 catch. He's going to get the touches. He's going to be there, and, opportunity is there. A talent like Mixon certainly can take advantage of that.
Do you have any concerns about the holdout? I've heard a lot say, well, actually the Bengals have the money to pay them, so I don't know why they wouldn't. Do you think that there's a chance that he misses games due to holdout?
I don't.
There's a chance, but I don't see it. I know they've visited at least a few weeks ago about discussions for a long-term deal, but we'll see where that goes. But no, I haven't seen anything any rumors or anything like that, anything that's shown to me that maybe he's gonna wait this out and see if he gets a long-term deal. I think he's at least good for now, but these things usually come out of nowhere and come as a surprise. They're not usually, you can't foresee it ahead of time and then, I saw this coming, so we'll see what happens the next few weeks with that.
What I think with this whole contract issue is the Bengals have always been notorious about paying their own and being loyal to their own. And then this offseason, I forgot, Field Yates put this tweet out of they spent north of $120 million in free agency. And that in the past 5 years going into this season, they spent around 50. Wow. So Joe Mixon sees the Bengals finally spending money. They have the cap room to pay him. I think it's a matter of, hey, just give me mine now.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you feel when this team doesn't go, they don't spend money and all of a sudden they almost double or triple what they usually spend.
Got to figure there's got to be money for me in there somewhere.
Yeah. They're definitely a team that I think it's such a hard division for them to say that they're even going to be able to compete for a playoff spot. But if Joe Burrow is a real deal, within the next 2 years, I think they will at least be getting on the fringes of playoffs for once rather than just being a bottom team, especially if they are a bottom team again this year just because their defense can't hold up. But like you said, they spent money. So
whose situation is better, Tua or Burrow? Or you could even say Herbert with that roster in San Diego or Los Angeles.
I'd almost say Tua, but it's close.
What's better? Are you saying from like
organizational
supporting cast? Because I'm the one to believe, let's say Patrick Mahomes really did land in Chicago. Is Patrick Mahomes who he is now? Because he landed with a historic offensive mind in Andy Reid, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, learned behind Alex Smith. Is Patrick, I'm not going to say Patrick Mahomes wouldn't be good, but would he be an MVP and a Super Bowl championship in 3 or 4 years into his career? Probably not.
Yeah, definitely not.
Likely not, yeah.
I think Burrow has the best situation. The Chargers just can't ever seem to get it fully together. I actually am becoming this like weird Dolphin stan, and I actually think that they're building something awesome. But
I love Flores.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. They've given him the latitude to do what he wants to do, and I think they will be competing for a playoff spot as early as next year, if even possibly this coming year. But you would have to have a lot of stuff hit. Whereas the Bengals, I think that they'll just be sniffing it next year even. But from a fantasy perspective, from an offensive pieces around him, definitely Burrow. His wide receivers are I actually think his wide receiving core is one of the best in the NFL. I think that they're awesome. And I think T. Higgins is going to be an awesome addition and heir apparent to AJ Green. So, but that's kind of for a whole different show, I guess.
Yeah, I'd put, as far as like an organizational standpoint, I'd probably go with Tua there. But as far as weapons and for fantasy, I'd take AJ Green over Parker and Preston Williams. He's 30 years old, but he's definitely the best receiver of the most talent. And then you got Tyler Boyd in the slot. I think they've got, as far as fantasy friendly offense and offense you want to buy into, definitely I would go with Burrow.
So things are about to get a little bit different here. And so rather than just kind of going number by number, I'm just going to read off what each of us have for 9 through 12. So Kevin, what's your 9 through 12? If you just want to say it, and we'll do that.
My 9 through 12 is 9, Austin Eckler, 10, Nick Chubb, 11, Todd Gurley, 12, Miles Sanders.
And then Anthony, your 9 through 12?
My 9 through 12, Leonard Fournette, Miles Sanders, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs.
And then I have at 9, Gurley, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, and Josh Jacobs. So we definitely have now finally some, disagreement, even if it's here or there, a couple players that are on other people's lists and not. I want to start with Gurley. We'll just go with he's my 9, but I want to start with him because I think he has the biggest variance out of this entire group. I want to know, if you knew Gurley was playing all 16 games, do you still keep him out of your top 12? Anthony, because you're the only one who doesn't have him in your top 12.
If I knew he was going to play 16, do I keep him out of my top 12? I would probably say yes, because what Todd Gurley are we going to get? He played in 15 last year. And I know he still finished as a top 24 or top 20 running back in PPR, but he got that from 14 total touchdowns. His receptions were way down. Targets were way down. And this was on a team that was passing a ton. I think they passed the 6th most times in team pass play per game, the Rams last year. The Falcons were number 1 in that category. Gurley's efficiency, 48th in true yards per carry, 48 yards per touch, behind one of the worst offensive lines. I believe they were graded out 31st by Pro Football Focus. He goes from bad offensive line to a bad offensive line in Atlanta.
So the offensive line is where I take an issue with. They had 2 rookies that they drafted, and both of them got injured.
Right. They also signed James Carpenter, and he was graded out poorly as well.
I think that their offensive line is going to be better. And that for me is why I actually bump Gurley up, because I think that even if he's not necessarily the focal point, I think he's going to be running behind a better offensive line. He doesn't have Darrell Henderson behind him, regardless of what you want to say. They still were giving him more touches than Brian Hill or Ito Smith are probably going to get. I do get the hesitation, and I think I was even surprised at how high I had Gurley, but his ceiling, I think, is just so high. And if, going to Georgia, being back in his home state, people don't like narratives. I believe in them. I think that he is going to want to succeed back in Georgia, back in Atlanta. So that being said, though, I would not fault anybody for keeping them out of his 12. I don't know. I think it's going to be exciting to see what he can do with a different offense on a prove-it contract, 1 year, $5 million. He's trying to show people that he's actually worth being considered one of the, top running backs in the league.
And I think too, his touches, he had 254 touches last year in 15 games. He was RB 14. On the strength of the touchdowns that he had. But looking at him and watching him, early mid-season with the Rams, when he did break runs, he still looked like Todd Gurley. He didn't look like a shell of his former self. So I think that if he can at least harness a little bit of that in Atlanta with the weapons around him, that I think that offensive line is going to be it's certainly going to be better than what they had in Los Angeles with 9,000-year-old Andrew Whitworth at left tackle. And, that was pretty much it when Saffold and those guys left. But, I think that offensive environment is only going to help Gurley. It's just the matter of, is Todd Gurley going to get beaten into the ground with touches? Who is really behind him? Ito Smith, Brian Hill, I can't foresee a big rollout of any of those three. But it remains to be seen. Maybe they sign somebody too. Who knows? But I think Todd Gurley's on that, that prove it contract. I think that he's got a big upside, at least this year, if he can get behind that offensive line, get with Matt Ryan, get with those receivers. He'll get lanes to run in, and I think it'll only be a good thing for him, especially in redraft. You're getting him at a pretty good value, late third, fourth round. If I'm going RB, I'm taking Todd Gurley all day as my RB3.
That's when I don't hate Gurley, when you're using that strategy.
Yeah.
But if you're going to take Gurley as your first running back, I can't.
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference between rankings versus where you're actually going to take him, because you don't need to take Gurley. At the earliest, you're probably taking Gurley at the very back, like the turn of the 2-3 turn. If you really like him, I'm not sure I'm even going to be able to do that. Now, I already moved Mixon ahead of him. Maybe I'll be moving him back as I just think about the comps between the Rams and the Falcons. They're probably way too similar, but I don't know. I just got a feeling about him. Maybe I'm just excited that he's not on the Rams because I hate the Rams. I have to. So I want to move on to Leonard Fournette. Kevin and I both had Gurley. You didn't. You have Fournette. We don't. Tell me about Fournette. I know you referenced him earlier in talking about his receiving chops. So
my thing with Fournette, why I still keep him in my rankings, in my top 12, even top 10, and why I keep a player like Austin Eckler out, because I took a lot of heat. Leonard Fournette has always been a productive back because of his rushing totals. Last year, we saw a touchdown regression, but then a huge uptick in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. Whereas with somebody like Austin Eckler, he was productive with Melvin Gordon out. But if you look at his totals across the board, whether it's targets and carries and receptions, they took a dramatic increase, especially in that target-wise. No more Phillip Rivers. I think we see a little bit a style change in that offense. Maybe more Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly with the Chargers. Whereas in Jacksonville, it's still really Leonard Fournette, and sure, they want to move him. That's probably not going to happen. Nobody's going to pay a premium for Leonard Fournette, they're having a hard enough time moving in Dockway.
Yeah.
They're probably going to run Leonard Fournette into the ground.
Yeah.
And when he is on the field, he's more or less a 3-down back. He had 100 targets with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. If Leonard Fournette can keep healthy, and then those touchdown numbers come up, I think we're going to see another top 10 year out of Leonard Fournette.
I mean, honestly,
is the targets an outlier? Of course.
Yeah,
but so is his 3 total touchdowns.
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, what I was going to say is, do you see Chris Thompson making any sort of realistic cut into those targets? And don't get me wrong, I like Leonard Fournette. I have him at RB14, and I will take him in redraft happily because I do think the touchdowns come up. I think the targets come down, but I think they're going to balance out, in the end. But they made a signing with Chris Thompson. Do you think he makes a realistic cut into some of that work and maybe take him off the field on 3rd down?
Maybe for a couple of games, but eventually, and you hate to say it about any player,
he gets hurt.
He's going to make that cut and he's going to leave the game.
Yeah.
And I hate to put it that way, but that's just, I can't trust Chris Thompson. And he was a very productive fantasy asset anytime he was on the field in that Jay Gruden offense, but he just couldn't stay on the field.
Yeah, he was one of my favorites for a long time.
I feel like Fournette, if you're looking for a high rushing floor, almost like that safe player at running back, it's Leonard Fournette, and he's not expensive.
Yeah.
No, you're getting him at value.
Yeah, he's going right before Gurley. 2
of the past 3 years, since 2017, he's been a top 9 PPR back or better. And the middle 2018, he only played in 8 games.
And does that concern you? I mean, his ankles have been not the best to hold up.
He did play 15 last year, but
he played 15 last year and 13 in 2017.
We'll see if it's an outlier though. And it remains to be seen, but maybe, played 15 games, And
you're almost taking a lottery ticket. What if they do trade him? And what if they trade him to a good team?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the number one thing is the touchdown positive regression is the biggest reason to bump him up. If people are going to fade him, take him solely on that, because even if his targets go down, receptions go down,
right.
I mean, he should be getting, 5 more touchdowns, like 8 touchdowns for his carry count is relatively normal. So,
I mean, even on a bad team, he's, that's certainly well within the range of outcomes.
Just like we were talking about earlier with Christian McCaffrey on the field 98.4% of the time, Leonard Fournette was on the field right around 91.7. Second behind CMC.
I honestly did not know that. That's crazy. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Like, who the hell else do they have?
Right.
Yeah, they didn't really have much last year either. I mean, besides Armstead, and he played sparingly.
So you referenced Eckler. I know that you don't have Eckler on your list. I mean, Eckler just seems like a legitimately just awesome running back. My biggest concern with Eckler, as you said, is the quarterback change. That's it for me. And I just don't know how much Tyrod's going to be passing to him. Nowhere near the same rate that Rivers is. But I also think we started to see just how good Eckler is. I have a hard time not putting him in my top 12 just from what we did see him do. But these back 4 running backs, I think that there's question marks pretty much with all of them and ways that you can doubt them. It's just a matter of who you believe in. With Eckler, Kevin, you also have him at 9. I have him at 11. You're even higher than I am on him. You think that he's just going to be able to not repeat, but at least get pretty damn close to it?
I mean, as far as Eckler goes, I think a lot has been I think it's actually understated with Tyrod Taylor throwing to his running backs, because we did see it when he was in Buffalo with LaShawn McCoy. He would throw to him. He had a really good year, couple years there with Taylor when he was starting. So you look at a guy like Austin Eckler, who's going to make his bones in the passing game. Maybe he'll see 150 carries, at max, but Austin Eckler is going to be plenty involved. You got to figure they're going to be maybe a 6 or 7 win team. The Chargers are. That's what I would predict. Certainly with breaking in a new quarterback eventually. But Austin Eckler is certainly going to be involved. He has the security, so he's not going to get paid and then sit like Duke Johnson. So, I've always been a fan of Eckler. I think he's always been underrated as a pass catcher and as a fantasy asset. Look what he did in the first half of last year without Melvin Gordon. Now, yes, it's certainly a different offensive environment now, but I think he can at least return top 12 value at minimum.
My office is right next to my front door, and it's 9:30 at night, and there's someone knocking on our front door. Anyway, sorry, guys. Got a little distracted there.
I'll take a Kit Kat.
Yeah. Chubb and Sanders and Jacobs are kind of last three we haven't talked about. I have my biggest reservations about Chubb. Dude's an amazing, epic runner. And sorry, my wife just opened the door. Chubb's an amazing, epic runner, but I just don't know how you don't buy into the possibility of how much Hunt is going to, eat into everything. He was only there for a few games, and when he was, Chubb was RB17. How does that not continue?
I agree with you there. I actually have Chubb at my 12, I believe, and I have Kareem Hunt right around 23 or 24. I think they're both going to be extremely productive in this offense, and I'm trying to find exactly where these guys finished in PPR because they were basically from weeks 10 to 17. Nick Chubb was the RB15. Kareem Hunt was the RB17. They're both going to be used from weeks 10 to 17 last year.
Okay,
that was when the first game Kareem Hunt was eligible was week 10.
But you have him at 11, and I get that that's not a huge difference, but you have to imagine that Hunt was getting more into game shape. They're gonna be very split, and Chubb's red zone efficiency, if I remember correctly, was pretty terrible. His goal line efficiency was pretty bad. Maybe that's a positive thing in that he can have positive regression, but you have someone like Hunt that we have seen he has been a top elite running back in that same tier as the other guys. So I just get a little bit nervous. I don't know if I could put him in my top 12. I'm happy to have him at 13, 14, but there's some red flags there.
Yeah, and keep in mind, too, I believe I saw a stat somewhere. I believe Kareem Hunt in those the last 8 games, I believe Hunt outscored Chubb in 6 of the 8, 5 of the 8, 6 of the 8, I believe. So either way, Kareem Hunt's going to have a role, and it's just going to cap the upside of Chubb. Chubb's a great runner. Don't get me wrong. If he had the job by himself, I think where he's in that mix he's in that Kamara tier. Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about that as far as from talent standpoint.
Totally. All right. Well, final 2 guys then. Jacobs, who I also struggle with. Jacobs, I don't know. He just did so much better than I thought he should. And that's why it's so difficult for me to rank him. I don't understand how in that offense and everything, he was amazing. If he hadn't messed up his shoulder, he would be probably even higher up just because of where he would have actually finished that last season, and we would have be thinking of him even higher. But there are just weird blocks with him. Anthony and I both have him at 12, and Kevin, you don't even have him in your top 12. I'm pretty sure he's 13 or 14 for you, but
13.
Anthony, with Jacobs, is it a hesitation to put him higher, or is it you just feel he needs to be in there even though you kind of want to put him lower?
I feel like when we get closer to the season, my rankings are going to change a lot, and he could be a player that falls out of my top 12 in favor for an Aaron Jones or an Austin Eckler. And with Josh Jacobs, I know that they are trying to sell us that they're going to use him more in the passing game. I just don't see it. They added a ton of pass catchers across the board at every position, tight end, wide receiver. I think they even brought in another, Devontae Booker, not like he's worth much, but he was at least a pass catching guy in Denver for a while. Mm-hmm. So much like almost he kind of reminds me of almost like a Nick Chubb. We're going to rely on that rushing floor, but you can't really buy into the receiving ceiling because there really isn't one where we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
The Raiders offense, we don't know what the hell that's going to be. They brought in Ruggs. They brought in Edwards. I'm very high on Hunter Renfro. If Derek Carr gets going, this could easily become a passing attack.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying. They put so much speed. It's almost like they're trying to replicate the Chiefs a little bit.
For me and Jacobs, I liken it to almost Jacobs' fantasy value being like death by 1,000 needles, because you've got Jacobs and he's not going to go down, but you've got all these factors coming in. There's so many things with Derek Carr, and then you've got, Lynn Bowden, you've got Jalen Richard, you've got all those guys that they brought in the draft, Ruggs, and you've got Waller. So there's a lot of weapons there, that are just going to be spread out a bit. That could cap Jacobs' upside. As a runner, I love him, but I just don't see him being able to take that next step with so many factors at play in that Raiders offense. I don't see him being able to get over that hump with the receiving upside to be a top 12 into the top 10 guy, for me at least.
I'm just not sure that I can buy into the idea that anyone else in that backfield is really worth giving any additional snaps other than just when you're resting him. Bowden, sure, but I mean, he's kind of that hybrid player. I think they're just giving a different element that Gruden wants to have. I think Jacobs can catch, we know he can, even if they're not using him that way. If anything, Bowden's kind of there to replace the Jalen Richard type thing eventually. I think that the Raiders are building a team for 2021 when they're actually to get the quarterback that Gruden wants. I believe this for a while, that Gruden got his 10-year contract. He's building for something that they didn't currently have. And God, as much as I hate to admit it, he put together an okay offense considering what they actually had. So I think that Jacobs is going to have a good amount of opportunity. And if he can stay healthy, which there's no reason to think he wouldn't, but assuming that he stays healthy, I think that if you got him at RB12, you're going to be very happy because he will outproduce RB12. But for right now, because of the various factors, like you said, that's why he's there. I'm hesitant to put him higher, even though I expect him to do better.
As far as with Bowden, now I'm not saying that those guys are going to get a big share. It's just with all those weapons spread out, I just think that, like I said, death by 1,000 needles. It's gonna be just spread out so far, so thin, with all those guys getting at least a little bit of something with what they want to do. It's really going to hit that. But I took Josh Jacobs as my RB3. If you're on Fighting Chance Fantasy, I've been doing the Value Town with the mock drafts. I've done Calvin Ridley and I've done Robert Woods, and the drafts that I've had, I took Josh Jacobs as an RB3 in the beginning of the third round. I couldn't believe he fell to me there. I'd be so totally happy with him as an RB2. I just can't see him as my RB1 and just being good with it.
And I've seen him go as early as RB7 in drafts. It was crazy. But hey, some people believe in him. So I want to just kind of finish off with Sanders, but really quickly with regards to Aaron Jones, because I have him earlier there. I'm sure that's just me paying respect to the man who got me to where I am with Scott Fishbowl and last year with most of my fantasy leagues, because he was totally my guy last year. Yes, he's going to have TD regression. It's going to come back from 19 that he had, 16 on the ground, 3 in the air. But I still think he's going to be in the low to mid double digits. I would think he's going to be a double-digit touchdown guy. He was awesome in the red zone. He was awesome through the air. Yes, they brought in A.J. Dillon. I'm not particularly concerned about it. I think that their offense isn't going to get any worse. The only reason that people think they could get any worse is because they think that they're going to change up their style. I don't know if you change up your style when you have Aaron Rodgers now. You just prepare for the future is kind of my mindset. Is there any major disagreements there?
Go ahead, Anthony. I think you were going to say
I was going to say I have Aaron Jones as my 13, and I could just easily flip him ahead of Josh Jacobs. I think I did overreact a little bit to the Packers offseason and all the clamor about, well, if they're going to run more and they're going to limit Aaron Rodgers' throws, and they brought in A.J. Dillon, he's going to get all the short yardage carries. I think there's going to be enough there for Aaron Jones to at least finish as a top 12 back.
And as the Packer fan here, and I feel like people are trying to get me to label me a contrarian because I'm completely off on fantasy as far as fantasy goes on most Packers not named Devontae Adams. But as far as Aaron Jones, the touchdowns, I feel like they have to come down. AJ Dillon, I don't know if there's going to be as big of a role for him, but if it does, it's going to be one of those short yardage grinder guys. And that's what Jamal Williams is too. He's going to have a role. They like to give a series to those guys. They'll take Aaron Jones off the field for a series. And if they start getting across the 50, they'll put him back in, but they really like to spell him and maybe, with the touchdowns in Aaron Jones, I think they have to come down. He's never been a picture of health, but as far as the offense, I think they're going to play more. That's the trend league wide that they're going to with the 12 personnel, they've got the guys to play that now. They drafted an H-back. They can move those guys, do a lot of rubs with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Adams and put him in the slot and do all this other stuff, because LaFleur had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay once. So, but yeah, we'll see with that. Aaron Jones, as far as skill position players, I mean, it's him and Adams, and then what else? So maybe just on volume, because if they're going to be successful, it has to be Adams and it has to be Jones. And I get that. I think I have him at 15. I'm not as high on him, but certainly the touchdowns could prop him up even higher than the top 12. I get that.
So last but not least is going to be Miles Sanders. My biggest concern, just to throw it out there, is the usage is always really confusing. I thought Boston Scott showed pretty well. I still think that they're going to bring someone in. I think it should be Devonta Freeman. I don't know why it's not, but that's I'm not a GM by any means. Sanders, Kevin, I thought you were a lot higher than him on 12 earlier in the offseason. It looks like maybe you've cooled some. So Anthony, you got him at 10. So why don't we start with Anthony? We'll go to Kevin, and that'll kind of take us out.
I'm very optimistic on Miles Sanders, and I think he's going to be the closest thing we are going to see to Doug Peterson using or committing to one running back. It's not going to happen. Boston Scott, he's going to be an impactful part, especially in the passing game. He reminds me of like the next Darren Sproles, and I can see them bringing in somebody. I think Devonta Freeman, he's already said he's prepared to sit out a year. I think he's looking for a certain amount of money that teams are not willing to pay him.
Yeah.
But even with Jordan Howard, and Jordan Howard outproduced Miles Sanders last year up until the injury, even taking that into consideration, Miles Sanders finished as the RB15 in PPR.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to see going into year two. The offensive line, there's going to be some changes. They're going to have Dillard starting, and Peters, if they do re-sign him, I doubt they do. He's going to be more of a reserve in case Dillard doesn't work out. It's still going to be a top offensive line. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic on Miles Sanders right now. And their receivers, forget about it. Alshon Jeffrey coming off the Liz Frank, and Deshaun Jackson, you can't count on him to play a whole season. They have a bunch of rookies and young players. Miles Sanders and Boston Scott both are going to be super productive catching footballs for the Eagles.
Yeah.
And you got to figure with the Eagles too, they played by far the highest, out of necessity, the highest amount of 12 personnel last season. Certainly, you'll probably see a lot of that this year with Goddard and Ertz. Miles Sanders, I think a lot is overblown about Doug Peterson wanting to acquire another running back. There's a about 50% shot, I would say, of they could pull somebody off the scrap heap and work him in. But I do think Miles Sanders definitely has the widest range of outcomes. He's certainly polarizing as a fantasy running back. I've seen him as low as 15 or 16. I've seen him as high as 6 or 7. Depends on where you stand on that. But I think that's just, we see the talent that he has. People were saying that in that Penn State backfield, people were higher on Miles Sanders or just as high as they were on Saquon Barkley. So I think that speaks volumes to how they view Miles Sanders from a talent standpoint. Now, as Anthony said, this is probably the closest that Doug Peterson will have to a 3-down back that he can just maybe not run into the ground, but at least back off of other running backs. But Boston Scott will be involved, and he'll be fantastic. He looked great at the end of the season until Miles Sanders got hurt, I believe, week 17. I believe it was his shoulder.
Who was the most talented running back that Peterson has had in Philly? If you really think about it, it's probably Miles Sanders.
Absolutely.
Jay Ajayi, Ryan Matthews couldn't stay on the field. Darren Sproles was ancient.
Blunt.
Yeah, okay. So maybe there's a reason why Doug Peterson never committed. Wendell Smallwood, Corey Clement, come on.
They were they were just really, they were guys. They were solid for what they were, but they weren't anywhere near the talent that Miles Sanders is.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Making strong points, making me regret my 9 through 12. So thanks, guys. That was the whole point of this. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you give us again, where people can see you, hear you, read you, all that stuff. And then Kevin, take us out after that.
You can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru, and you can follow my show at the FFFaceoff. We can be found at all of the top social media and podcast platforms. And don't forget about the mental health podathon we are running on Saturday, July 11th, 16 hours, star-studded event. You guys are going to be there. Really excited for it. It's for a good cause, and going to be a lot of football conversation.
Yep, we'll be there.
Cool. Can't wait.
Can't wait. Absolutely. So Anthony, again, thank you so much for coming on. We will be back on Saturday, Gary, because we're going to have one of our own.
Yeah.
We had him before, but we're going to bring him back because I guess we like him or something, right? Steve Rathon?
I think so. We do like him a little bit.
Yeah, he's all right. But no, we're going to talk the back half for running backs and into see what we've got in there, getting into that RB2, RB3 kind of mess there, and see what's going to come up to the surface. So I can't wait for that. That'll be a lot of fun. Those of you watching on YouTube, on Twitter, we thank you for spending some of your time to watch us here. And till next time, till Saturday, we'll see you later, and have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, y'all.